What's up guys, and welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here then welcome to our little corner of the internet. Today we're going to be watching a video titled "Why Can't America Just Take Over Iran's Strait of Hormuz?" Which I don't know the answer to that. Why are you asking me? I'm kidding, but I think it's because the Strait of Hormuz is divided with different countries, so you know it can't just be taken over like that. I don't know though. Let's see what this video is about.
Thank you, Battlefield 3, for preparing me for this moment. Why can the United States not just control the Strait of Hormuz? Iran has recently effectively shut it down and is not holding back on hitting ships that are making the daring move attempt sailing through it. America is now asking other countries for help while it struggles to defend it. And one would think that with us blowing up every piece of Iranian military tech we could find over the last few weeks, this shouldn't be a problem, and yet it is. So why was effectively wiping out an entire country's military from the sky easy, but defending a tiny strip of water is impossible? We'll strike at Karkan the like and subscribe button, and let's talk about it. On March 1st, 2026, the oil tanker Skylight was hit and damaged by Iran, less than 24 hours after they announced that they were shutting down the Strait of Hormuz. Since then, they have not held back and have inflicted multiple hits on several ships. Meanwhile, the world economy is scrambling to adjust. I'll talk about the economics behind this patch of water at the end, but first I want to focus on the military pew-pew boom stuff first. The Strait of Hormuz is a very narrow waterway located between the UAE, Oman, and Iran. At its most narrow point, it is 21 miles across, but the actual shipping lanes, the section of water that massive oil tankers can actually pass through, is only about 2 miles. The same distance that an out-of-shape American Army private can cover on foot in about 17 minutes. In military jargon, this is referred to as a fatal funnel. It is a very narrow, predictable, and vulnerable area that you have to go through no matter what.
So is the narrow area on Iran's side, or how does that work? Does it make a difference? I mean, I guess it does.
Half of war is literally just trying to find your target to begin with, but with the strait here, Iran's targets literally come to them. In case you were curious, the other half of war is extreme violence with really cool VHS filters and synth music. But theoretically, it should work both ways, yes? If you know that an attack is going to happen in one specific location, just put all of your defensive assets there and call it a day. Should be easy, right? Well, no. Blowing up stationary targets with Tomahawks and B-2 stealth bombers is a very different mission set than escorting a very slow, massive oil tanker through a deadly choke point. Anyone who has ever played an escort mission in an RPG video game probably knows this intuitively. First and foremost, Iran controls the north end. It is literally their territory. There are dense urban centers along Iran's coastline, which makes it way easier for them to hide stuff, and plenty of large highways connecting it to make moving weapons to the coast a lot less obvious. The weapons they're using on these oil tankers are by nature...
The city looks quite big from this point of view. I've never seen photos of Iran, like the streets or a street view or the city, but it looks quite nice.
It's a lot less obvious. The weapons they're using on these oil tankers are by nature easy to control because it's a bunch of small-ish drones that can be crammed into the back of a civilian cargo truck that blend in with the thousands of others in the area. Dropping a bomb on a big missile battery in the middle of the desert is one thing, but trying to find the weapons hitting oil tankers is like trying to find a needle in a haystack, except the needle is inside of another piece of hay, and all the other pieces of hay have civilians inside. That metaphor from a size ratio perspective made no sense, but hopefully you know what I meant there. See, Iran has mostly been using 3 kinds of weapons. Kamikaze drone boats, Shahed-style loitering munitions that fly in the sky, and underwater mines, all of which are cheap, hard-ish to intercept, and very effective. The small kamikaze boats are difficult to see on radar. Despite their small size, they carry hundreds of pounds of explosives, so they can, and currently do, easily punch holes through tanker hulls. Shaheds are usually launched in multiples, so even if all except one gets shot down, that one is enough to accomplish the mission. It's important to keep in mind that these are civilian cargo ships getting hit, not military ones. They are not built with the idea that they need to be able to just absorb explosions courtesy of the IRGC. An American aircraft carrier can shrug off a couple missiles here and there, but an oil tanker can't. Mines probably present the biggest headache to deal with. They are easy to deploy, can sit in the water indefinitely, and of the three require the most amount of effort to
Indefinitely. Oh, but they'd probably remember why they left the mines. Like, what if the war was over? Do they go and collect the mines, or what happens? What if they forget about a mine? What if there are mines that have been forgotten about? That's scary. I won't go on a cruiser anytime soon.
deal with. Demining is an incredibly dangerous operation, it's very labor intensive, and it's real easy to fuck up if you miss one. Iran spending an hour dumping mines into the strait could lead to weeks of us trying just to clear them. Not to mention that while doing that, American forces would be juicy stationary targets just sitting in the water. Now, the US Navy can, in theory, actively escort ships through the strait themselves, but that's like saying I could, in theory, eventually fill the Grand Canyon with the sand only
So there are people whose job is to go below water and look for mines? Oh, that's so scary.
using a spoon. What I meant by that is that it's incredibly hard and resource intensive. Not all of my jokes are gonna land. American aircraft would need to be flying non-stop patrols over huge areas. Fuel usage would be astronomical, every ship would be on full alert 24/7 while constantly maneuvering, and the ammo to take out all of Iran's incoming drones would be burned through faster than your mom's boyfriends have to burn through antibiotic prescriptions. And that's not even touching the demining operations that would have to take place afterwards. Right now, the
What are antibiotic prescriptions?
best thing the United States has that could perform this kind of operation is the Arleigh Burke-class destroyer. It is by nature an escort ship, though usually for aircraft carriers. Aircraft and helicopters are able to conduct patrols, but can't provide the constant overwatch this mission would need. Right now, the US has a dozen or so destroyers deployed to the region supporting Operation Epic Fury, along with 2 aircraft carriers. But they aren't all just sitting at the Strait of Hormuz. They're spread out across the Persian Gulf, Arabian Sea, and Mediterranean, doing missile defense, strike missions, and fleet protection. So even with that many ships in theater, only a few can actually escort tankers at any given moment. We could theoretically move all of our Arleigh Burkes to the strait, but that's leaving everything else completely wide open for new attacks. Arleigh Burkes are armed to the teeth, but not all of those weapons are actually useful here.
I just realized that he has a mag as a mic, right? Interesting.
Arleigh Burkes are armed to the teeth, but not all of those weapons are actually useful here. The primary anti-air weapon is the Standard Missile class of interceptors. These would make for quick work of any aircraft Iran might have left over somehow, let alone a Shahed drone. But they're also stupid expensive, and we don't have a lot of them, so it would not take very long to run out. A better option would be the ESSM, a smaller, shorter-range air defense missile that can be used in higher numbers. But same problem. They're limited in number and cost about $1.8 million each. The Sea Whiz, aka the Phalanx, would probably be our most cost-effective method of doing this, but it is a last line of defense kind of weapon. It also suffers the most from it primarily being for self-defense. Of the 3 weapons talked about so far, it has the least amount of ability to protect something other than the Arleigh Burke destroyer itself. Now, the 5-inch guns do give the destroyer a decent way of engaging waterborne threats, but that might be less useful than we first thought. Just this past week, an Iranian boat began moving towards the USS Lincoln aircraft carrier. But the nearby Arleigh Burke's 5-inch guns kept missing as it approached. They could not hit it. A pair of helicopters had to be scrambled so that they could fire a couple Hellfire missiles at the boat to take it out. Helicopters again are an option here, but that would mean we'd have to move even more ships that can deploy them into the strait away from where they are now doing other stuff. If only we were fighting those big floating red targets we use for target practice, then the Iranians would truly know fear. All the other stuff that destroyers carry, like tomahawks and torpedoes, are next to useless in this kind of scenario, and unfortunately, the ships we have over there are currently carrying a lot of those. But there's an even bigger issue. You can't really reload at sea. The gun-based systems can, but if it gets launched out of a missile tube, and the most capable weapons we have do, the ship has to go back to port to rearm sooner rather than later. The geography of the strait also poses a challenge. You might think the Navy could just park destroyers at the choke point and defend it like a guard tower or something. But the problem is that naval combat...
Why does it cost so much to make the missiles, though? Like, what? What material are they made out of? Like, where does the cost come from? Like, billions for one missile? Why?
don't work like that. A stationary destroyer is easy to target, the threat can come from dozens of miles in any direction, and the ships that they're protecting are constantly moving. Instead of just sitting still, the Navy would have to escort tankers through the danger zone while constantly maneuvering to intercept drones, missiles, and small boats. The very short time window between launch and impact of Iranian munitions does not give us the luxury of engaging targets at a distance. The Strait of Hormuz is very narrow, but it's also long. It's about 100 miles long depending on how you measure it. That is a lot of airspace and coastline to cover, even with every advanced recon and targeting asset we have. The number of cargo ships and numbers of weapons thrown at them over that 100-mile stretch is a near impossible task to fix. It's also important to remember that most of the stuff the United States has to protect against things like drones and missiles are for self-protection. Things like the Sea Whiz and Ram missiles couldn't be used to protect civilian ships unless we physically escorted them one at a time, and if the attack came from a favorable direction. And spoiler alert, they probably wouldn't. The maintenance issues for the Navy would be so severe they'd probably force mechanics into mental institutions. We don't have enough ammo to do this kind of mission forever, and it would cost so much money that publishing the final price would likely cause Dave Ramsey to start a civil war. And this, of course, would have massive, devastating impacts on the
Who's Dave Ramsey? Never ever have I seen his face before.
farming simulator community. President Trump has called on other countries like France, the UK, Japan, and even China to aid in using their own naval assets to protect the strait from Iranian attacks. But responses from this have ranged from "we'll get back to you on that" by Japan and France to "left on red" by China. Something to keep in mind is that, again, we are talking about protecting civilian assets, not military ones. A company that ships oil and the civilians on the actual boat will have exponentially lower risk tolerance than a bunch of sailors who legally have to go where the Navy tells them to. Not to mention things like insurance for the entire thing also skyrockets, driving up costs and reducing risk tolerance even more. The overwhelming majority of maritime corporations are going to just eat the cost and not operate in the first place. Even if the United States somehow had all the assets in place to fully protect the strait, if the threat is still there even a little bit, that itself can be enough to stop shipping from happening. I wonder if oil companies have considered just forcing Uber Eats drivers to long-haul individual barrels. It's not perfect, but it is a solution in my opinion. Now, the tactics that Iran is using for this operation are asymmetric warfare 101. Use a bunch of hard-to-stop attacks at unexpected locations against targets that are inherently hard to defend. And that in and of itself makes this very, hard. But adding to this, the United States just kind of sucks at the defense if we're being honest about it, at least compared to the offense when it comes to air and naval operations. Operation Epic Fury is an offensive operation. We went on the attack, and from a purely military...
Also, I want to know, where does the names for these missions come from? Like, who chooses the names? I want to be the one to choose the names.
Aspect, I've been doing pretty well in that regard in terms of the amount of stuff we've managed to explode. The Hormuz is a defensive operation, and the stuff we have in theater over there is overwhelmingly not for the defense. Yes, I know your football coach likes to tell you that the best defense is a good offense, but that's because he's never had to conduct airspace interdictions against one-way attack drones. See, the reality is that for life to go back to normal, and by life I mean big boats sailing off the coast of northern Oman, the US Navy would have to be 100% successful. That means every single missile, boat, drone, and/or stray bullet would have to be intercepted and/or stopped before fired. That is, in short, basically impossible. Now, this is not the first time this patch of water has experienced some issues. During the Iran-Iraq War of the 80s, a secondary conflict called the Tanker Wars was being fought. Both countries were trying to cripple the economy of the other and started shooting at stuff in the Strait of Hormuz. Eventually, the United States was called in to help escort Kuwaiti and Saudi Arabian ships that were getting hit. Called Operation Earnest Will, it was the largest naval action the United States had conducted since World War II. But Iran continued hitting ships escorted by the US, and that triggered Operation Praying Mantis, in which the US Navy essentially wiped out most of Iran's naval capabilities and took out and/or took over a handful of oil platforms.
But this... Wait, I'm sorry.
Was called in to help
Rewind.
escort Kuwaiti and Saudi Arabian ships that were getting hit. Called Operation Earnest Will, it was the largest naval action the United States had conducted since World War II. But Iran continued hitting ships escorted by the US, and that triggered Operation Praying Mantis, in which the US Navy essentially wiped out most of Iran's naval capabilities and took out and/or took over a handful of oil platforms. Earnest Will and Praying Mantis are so much cooler sounding than Epic Fury. Where did we go wrong as a country? And no, don't say that those words are randomly generated. That is not how it works for the bigger ones like this. But anyway, Iran mostly did stop the attacks after Praying Mantis, and the two operations were seen as a success. But there are some
But wouldn't this be something similar that would happen now?
huge differences compared to today. First is that back in the 80s, war was still cool, and if you wanted to blow up a ship, you had to use a giant missile or an airstrike, not just another drone. It's a lot easier to intercept one or two Soviet export jets than it is a swarm of loitering munitions. And secondly, Iran at the time was actively engaged in one of the most devastating and brutal wars of the 20th century against Iraq at the time, so the United States attacking them too was not something they wanted to deal with. Currently, the target right now is the United States, so that kind of complicates things from a motivational perspective. But even with those operations being successful, ships were still damaged or sunk, mines still floated underwater, and the international economy was greatly affected, just as it is now. Except now, the situation is a lot harder. These days, about 20% of the world's crude has to float through the strait, along with massive amounts of non-oil related shipping. To add to this, the biggest purchasers of this oil are countries like China, South Korea, and India. And if you didn't know, that's where the world gets its cheap shit from, so that just kind of adds a doubling economic effect to offshore manufacturing. But right now, there doesn't seem to be a solution. We've taken out Iranian mine layers and hit Karg Island with a bunch of munitions, and there are some hints at the moment that we might try to take it over with a bunch of Delta boys and Marines. But that...
So there's still ships going through though. Everyone who's working there must be so afraid to go through the Strait of Hormuz. Like who would work there voluntarily?
does not solve the problem as it stands. How this ends is a bit up in the air right now, and no one has a real answer, unfortunately. Personally, I think the UN should just try writing a strongly worded letter. That usually fixes things. But on that note, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.
Well, there was a lot of information in this video. I didn't really comment much because I was just tuning in and listening, because it's a lot. It's a lot. But thank you guys so much for joining me for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Please leave a like, subscribe if you haven't yet, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!